Aloha, friends, and welcome to my next story about encounters with the eighth house. This is probably one of my favorite stories, and it really kind of helps illustrate that we're not here to do things in the way that we typically conceive of doing. We're here to be, and we're here to connect with things in certain ways. Doing is just a result of being. So, again, I'm really glad that my Jupiter in the eighth house was able to help them to make sure that everything happened in a very just manner. So here's the story. We'll call her Mrs. Joe. Mrs. Joe was battling cancer, and she was finally going into remission. Now that she had enough energy to get all of her financial and final affairs in order, she and her husband were able to come to me and my stepdad and the business that we ran together in order to get those affairs put to rest. And we did just that. We worked very rapidly considering her health to make sure that everything was set up the way they wanted. If anything happened to her, there wouldn't be any inheritance issues. There would be no loose ends should anything happen to her, given the fight with cancer. And shortly thereafter, by the time we were finished getting all of their affairs in order, she had been given a clean bill of health. She was considered to no longer have cancer and was in complete remission. So her husband decided to take this contracting job out of state because he felt that he could leave her alone comfortably. She was doing better. All the affairs were in order. If anything happened to her while he was away, everything would be fine. He would be fine. So he left. Shortly after he left the state, as in maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks after he left, we got a phone call from Mrs. Joe stating that Mr. Joe was diagnosed with cancer. And again, these details, I'm not remembering them perfectly because they don't really matter. He was diagnosed with like a stage 3 or stage 4 type of cancer, and I'm pretty sure it had something to do with his digestive system. So it was not something that he was going to be able to recover from. And as a matter of fact, they came into the office after he was diagnosed, after this problem was discovered. And we basically said, look, we got everything in order for you and your wife because of your wife's condition. And now that you have your condition, just so you know, everything is in place. If anything happens to you, just as we had done for your wife, everything will go the way that you two have agreed upon. A couple weeks later, that's exactly what happened. Mr. Joe passed away, leaving Mrs. Joe in a very interesting situation, the opposite situation that they were anticipating. That was really, that happened in such an unusual way that it really brought from the depths interesting emotions for Mrs. Joe. A really interesting scenario. Like the dimension of the world that she lived in changed because she was living here in the Las Vegas Valley with her husband because that was where they had decided they wanted to live together. All of their children were back in the Midwest. So she was faced with this situation of, do I stay here in the Las Vegas Valley where I have the support of my friends? Or do I go home to the Midwest where I will have the support of my living children? And her question was, which one will be the best in order to give me the support that I need in order to grieve over the loss of my husband and to maintain the strength to keep the cancer at bay? Those were questions that she answered with, I'm going to go home to the Midwest to live with my children. And that is exactly what we did. And it was a challenge. It was a lot of work. They actually hadn't been living in Las Vegas for very long. So part of what we had done in order to get their affairs in order in the first place was migrate all of their accounts from the Midwest systems into ours so that they could be properly organized and registered so that they would go to the proper inheritance routes. And then we just turned around and we changed a bunch of things because that was her desires, her wishes. Because she moved back, she left the state, and it was she was so inspiring. Her courage, her determination, her willingness to face all of her emotions. She had a very, very difficult time because the cancer came back. And that just shows to me that she was, even though every time I saw her, she looked so strong and powerful. Truly, it was weighing on her on the inside because the cancer came back. She started seeing treatment again and continued seeing treatment after she had moved back. And she didn't make it for much more than a month or two after she returned home to be with her children. And I find that to be so beautiful. She actually came to me personally and asked for help in selling her husband's prized possessions. He liked his toys, he liked his tools, he liked his electronics, he liked his outdoors gear, all things that are very easy to help resell, which is what I did. She really embraced the lessons of the eighth house. Surrender, let go. And it has to do with other people's things. I mean, the seventh house is about marriage. And when that marriage actually dies, when the sun sets and returns to the earth, that's what happened to her husband. He set and he returned to the earth. And she recognized that what needs to follow that occurrence is the letting go of other people's stuff. And she called me personally to help her sell these items. She wasn't going to take them with her back to the Midwest. Sell those items, just relieve herself of this burden of the life that no longer is. And she returned home to her children, and she was able to leave this plane in their loving arms. Again, for me, all I see is this beautiful Jupiter in Capricorn, or Jupiter in Cancer, just this crab with the claws in their embrace. I know claws, those scary, but claws don't scare me. It's just this embrace that a crab will do, and just, it's okay. What's on the other side? It's okay. There's actually love on the other side. Yeah, actually, her story still inspires me. It's just inspiring to me that She did all that work just to die. You wouldn't do all that work for yourself, for your own soul's relief and growth, if there wasn't something beyond that threshold. Thank you for listening.